What's going on, everybody? I'm Average Joe and welcome to another Average video. All right, today is going to be, we're going to call it video 2.5 of the GRIDBOSS and FLEXBOSS21 installation. The reason I'm going to call it 2.5 is because I have a cat that wants to come up here now. Whenever I was doing the GRIDBOSS installation, I was going over a lot of the settings with the LCD screen, and maybe not everybody has the LCD screen, and I didn't really realize that until the video was done. So I didn't go over any of the settings through the web portal app or on the phone, which I'm not going to go over the phone stuff today anyway. We're going to go through all the settings through the EG4 web portal. And one other thing that I'll mention real quick, just for gee-whiz information, if you haven't seen me in the last 3 to 4 weeks, is because, well, I threw my back out and I couldn't really walk. So yeah, basically all I did is kneel down to adjust my right foot sock, and then I stood back up. While standing up, I had a little pop and some pain in my back. You know, it happens sometimes because I already have back problems. I just kind of shrugged it off and figured I would be out for like a day or two, just like I've done in the past. Well, this time was a little bit different, and I couldn't really walk for a couple of days. Massive pain, you know, I just kind of laid on the couch and didn't really do anything. Anyway, fast forward a couple of weeks, I am doing a little bit better. I'm able to stand up mostly straight and walk a little bit better. So we're gonna start the videos a little easy right now, and that's what this video is gonna be. So this is gonna be video 2.5 of the GRIDBOSS FLEXBOSS installation, and we're going to be going over all the settings inside the inverter, just in case you're not sure what they do. Maybe your inverter shipped with, you know, incorrect settings, which a couple of my settings were incorrect. So we're going to go over all of those settings today. Come on down. Yes, thank you. And just as a quick reminder, everything that I'm going to be doing with my GRIDBOSS and FLEXBOSS once everything is installed is basically off-grid stuff. I don't have a grid agreement, so I can't sell any of my excess electricity back to the grid. So everything is going to be kept in-house, kind of like an off-grid situation, even though we will have the grid available. Basically, we're going to try to use the grid as minimal as possible, basically in the self-consumption mode. All right, well, that's pretty much it. Let's get to it. All right, so over here on the computer, we're gonna log into the web portal app, the EG4 web portal app. So once you log into there, your screen might look a little bit different because you don't really have anything set up. And basically you wanna make sure everything is set up right after you do all of your firmware updates. I guess technically you could do it before, but might as well do it after. Okay, so obviously you're gonna have to power on your inverter. I would say the minimum way to do it would be just to hook up some batteries so you can log in here and either change or make sure all of your settings are correct. All right, so once we're logged in, the first thing we're gonna do is go up towards the top and you're gonna see a maintenance tab. We're gonna go ahead and click that one. Right underneath that, you're going to see a read button. We're going to hit that because that's going to pull all the data and information from the inverter. So we'll go ahead and do that real quick. Boom, now we have all the information. First thing below is going to be the device information. Right now, obviously, we're using the FLEXBOSS21, but you could be doing the FLEXBOSS18 or 18 kpv or whatever you're using. It's going to give you your local time, and then to the right of that's going to be your firmware version and LCD version. But if you're watching this video, you probably don't have the LCD. All right, there's actually two different ways that you can view this page. This is called the working mode, and then there is an old setting page right up here. But right now, we're gonna start off with the working mode page right here. All right, we're gonna try to run through this fairly quickly, and also keep in mind your use case might be slightly different than mine. I don't have a grid agreement, so basically all of my settings are for trying to zero out my meter or basically being off grid. So I'm not doing any sellback or anything like that. All right, so if you're gonna be in a similar situation, you're just trying to zero out the meter and be off grid as much as possible. These are the settings that I use, and some of the settings I did have to change in order for me to use mine. And I don't know if all of them are shipped out exactly like mine. Maybe the settings are already set in yours. All right, so the first thing we're going to take a look at will be the application settings under the basic tab, and the first one we have is general. And one thing I want to mention real quick is if you're ever unsure of what a setting does or is, there is a little tiny question mark under basically every single setting, and if you're not sure what it is or what it does, you can hover over the question mark and it'll give you kind of like a brief description. So anyway, for my settings right now, I have them under normal. I am not doing any standby or anything like that. Next one down is if you want to restart the inverter through the web portal app, you can do that, just hit restart. Next one down is off-grid mode, and you think I would want that one enabled because I'm trying to be, for the most part, off-grid. But once you enable that, if you are using your setup kind of like I am, where you have a main panel, and then from the main panel you go over to the inverter, and then the inverter output goes to a sub panel. That's how I have mine connected right now. If you have the off-grid mode enabled, you're not going to be able to backfeed your main electrical panel. Basically, it's going to kind of like shut that off, and it's only going to use the inverter output, okay? And it won't, you know, do AC charging or anything like that unless you have it specifically enabled. Anyway, you would think that you would want that one enabled, but you actually want that one disabled if you have a main electrical panel and a sub panel, kind of like I do. If you have everything connected up to a main panel or everything that you want to power connected to a sub panel, you could enable the off-grid mode, and then it won't try to backfeed and it won't try to zero out the meter. It just won't use anything from the grid. Actually, if I had my entire house connected up to the inverter output side, I would probably enable that mode just so I'm not using anything from the grid, okay? Next one down is the grid loss warning clear. Basically, if you're using your inverter in like an off-grid application, you don't have grid or anything like that, you would actually want to enable that function right there. And then the little warning and stuff will go away on the inverter. Next one down is the max AC input power, and it is set on no limitation. That's how it was set from factory, and I just left it like that. If you need to limit that for some reason, you can go ahead and click on these and set it to whatever you want. Over here on the right hand side is the EPS output, or the inverter output. Power backup, I do have mine enabled. Next one down is seamless EPS switching. I have that one enabled because obviously I want everything to continue powering my loads as seamlessly as possible. But there is another little thing to this. If we hover over this, it'll tell you if you're getting a lot of grid voltage fluctuations. Maybe the power is going on and off a bunch of times, you know, like brownouts and stuff like that. And this is trying to go back and forth, stuff like that. Maybe it's having, you know, kind of like a problem in judging all of that. You can disable this function. And I think what that does is it'll keep you kind of off grid a little bit longer. And then it might wait a couple of minutes to, you know, re-enable the grid function. I'm not 100% sure on that, but I just leave mine enabled and I haven't had any problems. Next one down is you can actually run this without batteries. And if you are doing that, obviously you're going to enable the no battery function. Okay, we'll scroll down just a little bit, and then under the protection settings, I did not have to change any of these. RSD is the rapid shutdown. These do have rapid shutdown inside. They are the Tigo, I believe. And if you have solar panels up on your roof, you're technically supposed to have rapid shutdown up there, which I actually do. You want to have that one enabled. But if you're doing like all ground mount arrays, you could probably disable this one if you want. Next one down is PV arc. That one was already disabled, and I'm just going to leave it disabled. But again, if you want to hover over this, it'll detect if there's a PV input arc fault, and it'll protect the inverter from the arc fault. If you do get that to pop up on the screen over there as a warning or whatever, you can go in here and clear that fault right over here. Next one over is grid sellback. I'm not doing any grid sellback like I mentioned, so grid sellback, I have mine on disabled. Next one down, grid sellback for power in kilowatt. Again, mine's set at 0 because I don't have that agreement, but you can kind of set how much you want to go back to the grid. Next one down is fast zero export, and that is set to enable, again, because I don't have a grid agreement to sell back my excess power. Whenever you have this enabled, I think what it does is it basically, actually we can just go over the question mark right here. It allows for 0 export. Inverter will speed up the control to avoid export power, but the control speed for import will be slowed down. Should be selected as the opposite of grid cell back settings. If you don't have an agreement or anything like that, make sure you enable that function. Okay, that's basically everything for this little basic section. We're gonna hit the advanced settings right here. Most of these I did not have to change. I believe whenever I first got mine under the parallel setting, the GRIDBOSS enabled, I think mine was enabled and I wasn't able to actually use mine over here whenever I was setting up the firmware and all that kind of stuff. I had to go in here and disable this function. So if you don't have the GRIDBOSS, disable that function. Set system type, I did not have to change that. That is on one phase master. This would be if you're doing parallel communications with another inverter, stuff like that. That's where a lot of this settings are going to be. I didn't have to change any of these settings right here. Protection settings, there's nothing over there. If we scroll down to the CT meter settings, this is the CT clamps that we installed. The measurement for these, of course, is set to CT. I did not have to change that. I think whenever we connect up the GRIDBOSS, we'll have to change this to 0 or empty. But again, we'll read the instructions whenever we get to that point. The CT sample ratio, I did not change. These are 1/3000 setting. I didn't have to change any of that. That was already set. Next one down is the CT direction reversed. Maybe you installed yours backwards or something like that. You can, reverse that function right here. Next one down is CT power offset. So just another thing, if I forgot to mention already, is I basically tried to set up the FLEXBOSS21 exactly like the 18 kPV that I had up here previously. And before, I had the offset set to -30 or -40. Again, if you want to read through this, it reduces the importing power or exporting power while working in on-grid mode. All right, so just a little side explanation or info note on how I kind of look at this is, since this is a hybrid inverter, whenever you turn on like your dryer, for example, the dryer is going to kick on, therefore pull in a bunch of power from grid. It's not always going to pull it directly from your batteries. Whenever it does that, the CTs that are monitoring the incoming power are going to see, hey, we're pulling in this much power. The inverter is going to be like, oh shit, and we're going to push back, that same amount of power, okay? It's going to try to zero everything out. And then whenever the dryer shuts off, you're still pulling in 6,000 watts. The inverter's going to see that. It's going to stop pushing back that much power, and sometimes it's going to push back into the grid, just a little bit. It's not going to be very much, but it will push some back. But basically, I think what we're trying to do is make sure we're always on the pulling side and not the pushing side. I think that's how the CT offset kind of works. I could be wrong though. I guess if I'm wrong, put that down in the comment section. Anyway, I have mine set to -40 right now. Really, honestly, I haven't seen any changes if I have it set to -40 or 0. So you could leave it on 0. That's what it showed up as, and I'm sure everything will be just fine. Anyway, next one over is your PV settings for the PV input mode. This one did show up as empty. I did have to change it to number 7 because I have 3 different arrays facing 3 different directions. I would imagine most people will have it on option 7 because they're going to have a couple different arrays as well. Next one down is the PV start voltage. So this was set on 200 volts. The last inverter, 18 kPV, was set on 140 volts. So I just changed mine to 140 volts. That's basically whenever it's going to start producing power and charging your batteries. You could probably leave it on 200 and be just fine. There's probably really not much of a difference at all. Okay, that's basically everything under the application settings. We'll scroll down to the working mode settings. First one, it says active mode, and it's in green up here on the top. That'll be the mode that we're in currently. And if you look down here, the green, it says self-consumption mode, and it's green right down here. Basically, we have grid available, but we're not using any if we don't have to. So we're basically running everything off grid. Okay, that includes powering my sub panel and backfeeding the main electrical panel. Okay, right below that is going to be your battery settings under the self-consumption mode. First one's going to be your battery type. If you're using lithium iron phosphate or just lithium in general, you're going to choose number 2. But the other options you have again is no battery or lead acid. The next one down is going to be your lithium brand for your communications. So whatever battery you're using over there, you're going to set the protocol from the battery to Lux Power, and then from here you're going to figure out which protocol you're going to be using. So if you're using EG4 batteries, it's going to be set on 0, and I believe that's what it was set on whenever I first got it. I just changed it to 6 because that's what the communication is for my batteries over there. One other thing I did have to change is the share battery option. Mine was set to enable, and I'm pretty sure I had to change that to disable for everything to work correctly. But it did show up as enable. Basically what this one is for is if you're using the GRIDBOSS and paralleling inverters together, you're sharing the battery. Basically, this allows all the information and stuff to go, in between inverters and the GRIDBOSS. So if you're using another inverter or the GRIDBOSS, you're going to make sure you enable this option right here. Okay, right below that, you can base your charging and discharging off of voltage. That would be if you're using lead acid batteries or lithium batteries without battery communications. You would choose voltage here, and then you would set your voltage to basically whatever you want. Since I am using battery communications, I am going off of state of charge for charging and discharging over here. Right below that is your system charge, your state of charge limit. It is set on 101% automatically, from EG4. That'll basically charge your battery up to 100%. It won't go up to 101%. I've just never seen it do that, but it'll make sure it goes up to 100% state of charge. Also with this setting right here, if you're trying to be within the, 90-10 or 80-20 range of your batteries, if you want to leave a little bit at the top and a little bit at the bottom, so you get a, longer lifespan of your batteries, this is where you're going to set it. Most people, I guess, if they are doing that, they're going to change it to 90% state of charge. If you're going off of voltage, again, that's going to be right down here. It was automatically set on 59.5. I would not charge my lithium batteries that high. I would probably go to, on a normal day-to-day basis, probably 56.4 volts. That's just because that's what I've always done. Next one down is your charge current limit. That's how much you can charge, at any one time. It was automatically set on 250 amps, and I'm going to leave it. And then charge last, I've never used that function. I just leave it on disable. Okay, and then same thing basically for the discharge settings right over here. I have mine set to use the state of charge setting. If you're going off of voltage, again, you can change that right there. You have your discharge current limit. It's set on 250 amps. I just left it the same. The start discharge power import in watts, I didn't change anything. That was already set on 100. The next one down is your off-grid cutoff % state of charge. So this is if the grid has already gone down and your batteries are basically down low and you want the inverter to basically start shutting down and stuff like that. I have mine set to 8% state of charge because I think it says in here there's a margin of plus or minus 5%. I want to be able to use basically as much battery capacity as I can if the grid has gone out. Basically, I want to use as much as I possibly can. But if you don't want to use, as much as you want, you can change that up a little bit higher. I believe this one was set on maybe 15% whenever I first got it. I changed it to 8. The next one down is on grid cutoff. So just like we have right now, and we're using the self-consumption mode. If grid is available and the batteries get all the way down to, I have mine set for 25% state of charge, right at that point, it'll go ahead and start using the grid, at 25% state of charge. If you want yours to go down to, 15 or 20% state of charge, that's where you're going to set that one right there. The only reason I have mine set for 25% state of charge is because the batteries that I have right now, if they drop down to 20% state of charge, it will automatically switch over to grid and then automatically start charging, you know, and it doesn't matter on what settings I have in here at all. So that's why I have mine set to 25% state of charge. If my batteries did not do that, I would probably bring that all the way down to like 10%, because I want to use as much battery power as I can. That kind of goes into that, you know, 10% at the bottom and 10% at the top. You can do whatever you want. If you're doing voltage, again, you would set those settings right down here. All right, now if you go back up just a little bit, you have a backup mode, peak shaving mode, AC charge mode, PV charge priority mode, forced discharge mode, export PV mode. Okay, I don't really use any of those other settings except for backup mode and AC charge mode, which they're both kind of the same. I do not do peak shaving because I want to be off grid as much as possible. PV charge priority mode I don't do, and of course the export, I just don't do any of that stuff. So all right, we'll do battery backup mode example first. So if you have this one enabled, basically you're going to be using the grid as your primary source of power. If the grid goes out, inverter is going to seamlessly switch if you have that enabled and continue powering your loads until the inverter shuts off or the grid comes back on. If the grid comes back on, you can set how much power, you know, this is kind of like if you don't have solar power or anything like that. You can set your AC charge rate. Right now I have mine set to 2000 watts. It's pretty low. I just try not to charge from the grid if I don't have to. Again, you can change the charging power to whatever you want. And then right underneath that is your backup percent state of charge. If you want your batteries to only charge up to 90% or 50% or whatever, that's where you would set it right here. Once it reaches whatever percent you have in there, it'll stop charging and it'll continue powering your house from the grid. And then of course you also have the option to do it with voltage as well. And then on the right hand side is going to be the time that you want it to do that. If you want it to charge any time of the day, no matter what, for the time right here, the first one you're going to set it to all zeros, and then the next one for the end time is going to be 23:59. That way you get the full 24-hour range. You only want it to charge during a specific period of time, you know, like at nighttime. Let's say you get charged less in electricity, you know, you can do that right here. So it doesn't charge during your peak hours, stuff like that. Okay, next one down is peak shaving mode. Again, like I said, I don't do any grid cell back, and my electricity rate is the same all the time. So these settings in here don't really have a use for me, but maybe they do for you. Most of these are kind of self-explanatory. Basically, whenever you get it set up, you would enable it, and the inverter is going to do what you want it to do. Okay, so that's pretty much all I know for that setting right there. Next one down is AC charge, and it's real similar to backup mode, except for whenever you want to charge your batteries, you just hit the enable button, how much power you want to charge with, and then you can do that AC charge based on time. You can do it based on percent state of charge, and of course you can have it stop at a percent state of charge, whatever you like. Same thing for voltage, and again, same thing for the time. If you only want it to do in a certain amount of time, you can set that over here. I don't ever really do this. Honestly, I just hit the backup mode and turn that on and it'll start charging the battery. That's pretty much what I do. PV charge priority mode. I think basically this will just send most of your PV to charge the batteries. Pretty sure that's what this setting does. I never use it. Forced discharge mode. Again, this is if you can sell back to the grid and you want to force discharge your battery energy into the grid. You can do that with these settings right here. Obviously, I never do any of those settings. Okay, that's basically all of your working modes right here. Mainly, all I ever do is self-consumption and backup mode to charge from the grid if I have to charge from the grid, which I try not to do as much as I possibly can. However, during this time, we still have a lot of leaves on the trees, and it is November 5th, and the sun is kind of low in the sky, so I have actually had to charge a little bit from the grid, which sucks. Next one down is your battery settings, which we already went over, and then next one down is your grid settings, which I did not have to change. And since I'm here in the United States, I've got it set on 120, 240, or option 0. However, you do have a couple other options in here as well. And then finally, if you manage to muck the entire thing up and you're not sure how to fix it, you can reset everything back to default right here at the bottom. All right, that's a quick run through of all the settings. Again, if you're just setting yours up for the first time, I would just try to kind of match what I have here. And then once you get everything kind of set up and running, you know, maybe go in there and kind of tweak it to your needs. All right, well, there you go. That's going to be all of the FLEXBOSS21 settings through the web portal. Again, you could use this for the FLEXBOSS18, 18 kPV, and probably many of the other Lux Power hybrid inverters. Basically, all we wanted to do is make sure all of your settings are set somewhat correctly, or at least the same as what I'm doing. And then whenever you're up and running, you can go in there and fine tune or tweak as necessary. And again, if you manage to muck it all up, you do have the reset to default, or you do have the option of getting a hold of Signature Solar or EG4, and they can go in there and help you out. Alrighty, well, that's pretty much all I got. If this video was helpful in any way possible, make sure you like that smash button on your way out, and I'll see you on the next. What do we got over here, Horace? What are you guys doing over here? Taking a nap in the tree? Chasing your own tail? Yeah. Cats and Christmas trees is a normal thing. Okay. I'm gonna take a picture for Lauren.